So without any further ado, let's put the pedal to the metal, and I hope I don't wig out. Yes, it's all about jargon today. The Jargon Busters. A very warm greetings to Emma, to Gaetane, to Philip, and to Phil. Not my guests or our guests today, but actually co-presenters and co-conspirators, if you like, as well, as we try indeed to break through some of the jargon which we're using a lot in the water sector, which doesn't necessarily make us as attractive as we think we definitely should be. Is that not right, Emma?
That is very right.
So let's change it, Gaetane.
Yes, indeed, and we're ready for it.
I'm not going to introduce you in detail because I think a lot of people on the call as well that I see know you quite well as well, but I will introduce, if you will, Philip and Phil. Philip, you're joining us today from rainy Frankfurt, or maybe not.
Maybe not.
And it's a delight to have you with us. So you're the kind of person, I think, which, you know, we'd be really interested in trying to attract to the water sector, the water industry, and that's what your role is really here today. You work at the Frankfurt School of Business in the blockchain, what do you call it, a blockchain institute?
The blockchain center. The
blockchain center. And, you know, you've been quite prevalent when it comes to pushing the blockchain, not only in Germany, but around the world. Have a podcast of your own with 60 episodes or so, or something like that.
We have 75, I guess.
Oh dear me, it's been 2 days since I tuned in, you can tell. So warm greetings to you. And Phil, my old mate. Phil is a copywriter, a very good copywriter, and he's our wordsmith for the day. So as we get lots of input from you and also some of our thoughts on jargon we use, Phil is going to be thinking about how we can maybe improve the situation. I'm not going to promise brand new jargon or brand new words right away, but maybe some trains of thought that'll get us thinking and moving beyond 4 terms, which we're going to be looking into in more depth. And those terms were born from input that many of you here on the call have given us, and a lot of people in LinkedIn and Twitter, you know, gave us. I got a big long list of all the terms which were there, but we had to select 4, and we selected 4 that Gaetane, Emma, and myself particularly can relate to. So I did mention that we're going to have you know, lots of audience input, and we're going to do that via Slido. I assume that many of you are familiar with this. If you're not, could you just open a browser with slido.com? It could be on your phone, or it could be on your iPad or your computer, whatever you've got handy. And the code for today's event is J791. If you can use that, J791, then we're going to be asking for a little bit of input in just a second. But before we go to that, we're going to make things more sexy. Emma?
No, not.
I don't like that. Tell me.
So I somewhat provocatively commented on, I think, Twitter, saying maybe we shouldn't be using the terms make X more sexy either. So I propose that we slide that one into retirement as well.
The first one.
And I see Lisa nodding along to this too.
Absolutely. Okay. Agreed. Okay. It's gone. We'll go straight into our first term, our first comment. As we talked about before, we're going to be looking at some of these phrases and then trying to reword them and re-jargon them. And the first one we have is toilet to tap. And this came through as one candidate in a lot of your input, where we're talking about, you know, recycling water, about used water, et cetera, et cetera. But Gaetane, how do you relate to toilet to tap?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, which I've come across. You know, if I like to share with you a little story about this toilet to tap. We had in France a publicity campaign like we did from Crystalline, precisely. And the interesting bit about it was, you know, that actually the tap water that you drink comes from your toilet. So literally, you know, it's toilet to tap. And that was the publicity. I can tell you, you know, that the French big water companies were not very happy about this, but you had that, you know, all around France, you know, on big billboards. That was quite interesting, but very misunderstanding. So I would vote, you know, to take that out.
Okay, well, let's work on it. And I saw one or two of the other adverts which they had. One was with a tap, and they pointed to the tap and said, chlorine and fluoride and all this horrible stuff in your water. Would you want that, or would you want crystalline?
Yes.
Exactly,
yeah. So
well, before Emma, we come to you. I heard about toilet to tap really the first time when it was used really as a bad example of how to sell the reuse of water to the public, because I think San Diego it was going back maybe 15 years ago, used that in their public campaign. And not only did it, you know, kind of disgust people, but it drew quite negative attention to the whole program, which I don't know if it delayed it. I think it actually got postponed for quite a while because there was a lot of public uproar, and a lot of people came out and said, well, they're going to be directing this dirty, horrible water to the poorer parts of our society. And it all turned into almost a Black Lives Matter campaign against this whole thing in the San Diego area quite a while back. But there are also some positive examples. And all of us, I think, know Singapore's story of various different national taps, as they call it, the natural water resources, the imports from Malaysia, which they've been very dependent on, at least in the past, but also desalination and new water. And new water is so pure, as they said, we have to mix it with natural water, and dirty natural water almost, before it's fit for consumption. That's how pure it is. And that was the angle that they took, not in terms of spin. It's the literal truth, of course, as we know, but they built the whole campaign around a more positive image. That's the basic message here. And you can see at the top of the screen is their new water visitor center, which if you get a chance to go and have a look at that, is fabulous. And they have had various publicity campaigns, but also they've opened it up to all kinds of people like Naz, this guy doing Naz Daily, a blog or an influence, if you like, in the region. And he actually said, oh, this is made of pee. But then he drank it and he said, this is mind blowing. It's amazing the things which we're doing here. So yeah, they did sort of have a very healthy discussion about where it comes from and what it is, but then they show the technologies which are used for it, etc. So that's one other way maybe of using jargon, but in a more positive way. But Emma, you've had experience as well with something similar.
Yeah, so when this phrase came up and I was thinking about a story for it, the first thing that came to mind was my first job in water, before I knew that the water sector was a sector. And the job was working as a nature specialist at a summer camp in Canada. And part of my job was to take kids into the forest and teach them about the environment and get them really engaged. And so over the course of an entire summer, I would build out these programs and these educational trainings. And so I would take the kids off into the forest. We would sit in a circle around. And for the water cycle, the game or the activity that I would do would be talking about Wally the water drop. And Wally the water drop would go on adventures and flow through the water cycle. And that was my way of engaging the children in understanding that we are in a closed system. And invariably, every single time, depending on the age group, of course, but I would start off with Wally the water drop coming out of a dinosaur's butt. And the kids would go wild for this. And then I would finish it off and say, and then it ended up coming out of a tap. I would take a big gulp of water from my Nalgene and the kids would go wild. And then it was just this beautiful way of engaging them and having them understand that water flows, it cycles, all of the water we have is recycled at some point. And as long as we treat it properly, then we can drink it. And that was my toilet to tap positive spin on it. And so when I started working in the water sector properly, like we do now, I understood that this toilet to tap didn't always have a very positive connotation to it, but it's all about how we communicate And I think that if we use the right communication tools and the right engagement, then we can turn it into a positive spin.
Excellent. That's what we're attempting today. Yeah, Tom and I were talking a little earlier, actually, and we also know a Wally the water drop, which is being used. So that's it's an interesting connection. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same one, but we'll take that discussion offline, shall we? Okay, folks, this is the time where we would like your input. I did warn you that we're going to be using Slido today. So if you go to slido.com, you can use the QR code here as well if you wish. And the normal code to type in is J791. And we would love to have your feeling about how much you would really like to get rid of this toilet to tap. Is it, yeah, kind of okay? Then 1, 2, 3. The higher your rating, the more desire you have to get rid of this term. So 7.9 is the score on the rating. So that's reasonably high. I would have thought it would have been a bit higher. Oh, that's still going on. 8, okay. But that gives us at least definitely, I think, a mandate, Phil, to try and have a bash at this. But Philip, before we go to our wordsmith, what do you think when you hear, you've not heard any of these terms yet, but what do you think when you hear toilet to tap as a potential water professional of the future?
I mean, I'm not that negatively impacted by the term, honestly speaking, because I think it creates some consciousness about recycling water in the end, and it also depends on where you actually live in the world. So I guess in Germany, drinking water out of the tap is pretty clean, and I think Germans they trust, so to say, the cities or the state that they really will clean the water coming from the toilet then to the tap again. But when I look at other parts of the world, for example, to South America or even to the US, I'm not really sure if people really trust their government or their cities or their cities if they really properly clean their water. So I, as a German, don't really have a problem with this term, but because, as I said, I trust the government with like handling dirty water. But I can imagine living in the US or, for example, in South America or in Asia, then this means something else and has some kind of a negative, some negative effect to it. This kind of jargon, I would say.
Got it. Okay. And of course, you're in Sardinia right now, so not quite sure what your water recycling system is like.
Right. I mean, that's also really bad. So I hear it is fine for showering, but for drinking, it's not that fine, you know. So you always have to buy water in the supermarket, even for cooking. But yeah, so I think it really depends where you actually live.
Okay, Phil, what was your take when you first saw this word as a wordsmith yourself?
I mean, for me, this one is sort of, it's certainly not something that I find palatable as a consumer. I think, you know, if you look at it purely from the angle that Phil was talking about, I think, you know, it describes a process, doesn't it? It describes a sort of water recycling process and the journey of that water. So I can sort of say from an internal point of view, maybe for water companies, from an engineering point of view, it sort of describes the process, you know, quite well. But in terms of the San Diego example, in terms of the crystalline example, I mean, the very fact that a brand can use this sort of idea to promote their bottled water, you know, speaks volumes about, you know, what consumers would think of something like that. So I think, you know, for me, jargon essentially is a sort of attempt by somebody to tell or open up a very simple story to explain something very complex. And I think in this case, they've maybe succeeded on a business level, but certainly not on a consumer level. I think the examples that we've heard from Emma and Gaetane, you know, from Singapore as well, show how you can spin a jargon story in many different directions. So, the fact that Singapore took a much more palatable, consumer-friendly approach, that the water is new, I think gets rid of this problem, puts much more positive spin on it, and I think as well, if you can take Emma's example of Dino to tap, to explain the closed system, you can see very quickly how you can tell different stories with jargon, and maybe in this sense it's all about context, isn't it?
Well, let me stop you there, and because I would like to ask you to give us some sort of leading thoughts as to what we could maybe do with this now, where we should go, because we gave you these phrases kind of yesterday, and you've been paying a bit of thought to it. And at the same time, whilst Phil is sort of describing his thoughts of how to help us here, we would like you to as well, using the same Slido interface, give us your words and your phrases and your ideas, so that Phil can then take it and do a bit of re-engineering kind of on the spot. So Phil, over to you, and everybody at home, please, in the office, sorry, everybody in the office, please type in your thoughts and words that you would like to see.
I think from my point of view, looking at this, I really think the direction to go is to put a more positive spin on things. So, as said, I like the direction that Singapore used with new water. I think you could also, go in the direction of renewed water. I think going even more boldly in that direction. What about refreshed water? If you take something and refresh it, it certainly sounds much more appealing. What I also think is an interesting thing is, essentially, we're talking about water in a closed cycle and water that is lost. So what I also think would be an interesting sort of approach would be reclaimed water, essentially winning back water that's been lost, or even won water, water that we've won back from the cycle. And going even further in that direction, one sort of more sort of surprising and disruptive approach, I thought would be, water is traveling downstream in this closed system and we're losing it. So why don't we upstream the water? Mm-hmm. So we have upstreamed water, we go against the flow in that sense. And one sort of, which is a little bit more out there, which I also thought had some value, was Phoenix water. So essentially, water that has been magically reborn. We've added a new set of wings to the water that it can then fly again through the water cycle.
Nice. Okay, well, we've got a few here as well. Angel tears, a taste of history.
These are so good, guys.
Yeah, it's fabulous. It's very creative. Crystal water, renewed water, reuse. Design water, clear water. Okay, so let's leave it at that. I'm just going to take a quick screenshot, and maybe you've got one as well for yourself, Phil, because you're going to take this in a moment and then think of, add yours and then think of something which might be a bit more definitive. We'll see. But let's come to our second term of the day. Future leaders. Emma.
I feel attacked. Future leaders has come up a lot, especially on Twitter, on LinkedIn, with regards to the hashtag future water leaders, which Andrew seems to have a notification on and always pops up during.
I follow the hashtag.
Yeah. I think this is especially interesting for a few different reasons. One is the aspirational aspect of it. So why do we brand a certain type of person within the water sector as a future leader? I think that is to give them the aspiration of eventually they can pick up the mantle and put on the hat of being a leader in the space. Another aspect of this also comes down to almost the sidelining or the segregating of groups of people within our sector that tends to happen. So by positioning young professionals as future leaders, we can set them up for the future, but we don't really need to speak to them right now. Their voice can come in the future. What I would like to spin it to is leaders for the future. So they're future leaders in the sense of they're thinking towards the future, but they are leading in the present. And I think future leaders or leaders for the future need to take up more space in the present and have their voices heard now and not be sidelined in those discussions.
Fabulous, thank you. Yeah, and my point as well was really the segregation that you were talking about, and say, okay, these are the youngies, you know, in the corner over there. Let's leave them over there. We don't want too much disruption. And so, you know, particularly at conferences and things like that, you quite often have a special session just for the young future leaders, if you like. And I don't think that's right. Anyway, Gaetane, do you have anything to add? If not, I'm going to ask Philip to give his opinion about the future leaders.
Well, just a few thoughts, you know, I'd like to share with you and the audience, and I'd be happy to hear, you know, if they agree. But I think leader is very misleading because not everyone is a leader. And this issue about the future leaders, does it mean that today we don't have any leaders in water? So instead of this, you know, what I would suggest, you know, and I'm maybe taking up, you know, Phil's role, I would suggest another word for it, is that what we need in the water sector is entrepreneurs, who then will become potentially leaders. I think the water sector needs to lead somehow, you know, in what I'm not sure, but we don't need to be, you know, we don't need to be leading to be successful, but you need to be an entrepreneur if you want to succeed, at least, you know, when you run a company. So I would suggest, you know, I don't know what, Phil, you think, by replacing, you know, leaders by entrepreneurs.
I think that's, you know, definitely a possibility. I think you could have two issues with this, couldn't you? I think, you know, Emma touched on some of these, you know, the future aspiration aspect of it and the leadership aspect that you've touched on. I think in one sense, you know, the term doesn't really sort of acknowledge the current achievements of so-called future leaders. You know, it's sort of paying it forward, and you know, in the future, you know, you can join the big boys in the big club. But at the same time as well, I think the label, you know, the label is essentially, it's bestowed upon, you know, the upcoming next generation of talents, isn't it, by, you know, by the established sort of leadership. So I think a more interesting approach could be to sort of, you know, what would this group of people call themselves, you know, rather than, you know, having a label sort of attached to them.
Well, let's go to someone who was a future leader a long time ago, but is now already a leader in his industry in blockchain, where I think everybody, you're quite old now, Philip, coming to the end of your life almost in blockchain. Right? So will you become a has-been? Will you become a was leader? Or how does your industry and what you do, how do you, you know, deal with this?
I mean, I do have a lot of problems with the term leader, to be honest, because everybody understands something different when like saying or hearing leadership. So of course, in university and business school, you have different lectures talking about what is leadership exactly. And I think leadership is not only, for example, thought leadership, but also in like a social way, that you like treat your employees the right way, for example, that you don't do harm to the environment. So I think leadership is a sum of many different things. And when we talk about future leader in the water sector, maybe, then it's too narrow, because a leader is mostly understood to be on top of some kind of a pyramid, you know. And when we talk about water, my understanding is that everybody needs to support some kind of way to actually ensure that we still have clean and fresh water. So kind of having some kind of basis to live from. And I wouldn't say leader, I would just say maybe it's quite entrepreneur is I think a pretty good term. We heard it before. But maybe we also need somebody who is really bringing thoughts into the industry and talks about new ways of dealing with water and with the industry. And yeah, because right now for people like me, it's very intransparent how the water sector is actually made up. So I have to admit that I didn't really know that there is like a big water industry there. You know, of course, I know that there's, for example, Nestle or other firms who are like really making a lot of money with water. But then I think we need people who really advocate for water and for yeah, bringing us to the future there.
Some excellent points there, and a lot of food for thought for us as well, I think. So we've got a score of 7.5, so it's slightly below toilet to tap, 7.4, and still quite high though. So I think there's certainly some mandate here, Phil, to do some wordsmithing, okay? I'm going to click on our word cloud opportunity and ask the audience to just put in what comes to your mind as Phil describes, you know, a potential direction in which we could go here. Entrepreneur is something we've said already. Change makers, visionary is coming up there. Phil, have you got anything else for us?
I like visionary. Yeah, catalyst is nice too. Guardian's got a nice sort of protective quality about it. I think it's really, in some sense, it's this two-pronged thing, isn't it? I think, as Phil was saying, it's you know, in one sense, it's the visionary aspect. In the second sense, it's the entrepreneurial. It's like a combination, maybe, of both, isn't it? Champions is also nice, isn't it?
What about the more action words that we see in SWAN or the International Water Association, for example? So you have the rising smart water professionals, you have the emerging water leaders. That kind of action words, I think, also speak to what we were saying before around taking the space in the sector and thinking towards the future and taking that active role.
Good points as well, definitely. Yeah. Okay, and I like the way you twisted it around a little bit, Emma, and said, you know, the leaders for the future has a completely different feel for me, at least, than just future leaders. Good. So Phil, again, a bit of input there for you. So what I'm going to do now is to leave you, Phil, for a minute or three to work through those first two terms, which we urgently need to put into retirement and come up with.
Okay, I'm gonna go dark then for a moment.
You do go.
While I work on this
and put your thinking hat on. And in the meantime, we'll talk about a couple of terms, if we can, Gaetane and Emma, that also came up through the input which we've got here. So resilience. And climate change, our group together. I mean, to me, resilience to start with is, you know, obviously you've got to force things away, you've got to hold things back, and it's a lot of effort, and it doesn't feel very natural. It's not like the energy is flowing naturally. That's in terms of the word, and that's my argument with it, if you like. Mm-hmm. Do you have any take on that as well? Resilience, climate change in that context.
When you talk about, oh sorry.
Yes.
When we talk about resilience, I mean that's like a big buzzword right now, even in science, because when we talk about COVID-19, for example, there's always the word resilience popping up. And so now I would say resilience is a bit negatively impacted through the virus currently. So when we talk about resilience, momentarily, it's always connected with resilience to COVID-19, that we have enough beds in the hospitals, that we have enough testing, that we have enough prevention against the virus. So for me, resilience is right now not a really positive word. Of course, as you said, Andy, resilience means to have some kind of forces to prevent certain kind of things from coming, I would say. But for me, resilience is really negatively impacted right now.
That's right. And for me, it's very much, we can't do anything about it. We are resilient. We accept the situation as it is. That's the way it is. And frankly speaking, if I want to be a bit controversial, sometimes, no, well, as an exception to the rule. Frankly, that's what the water sector, has been as well, very resilient to what was happening or what has been happening. So it's how you can transform that from being resilient to being proactive and not just accepting, the way it is.
Well, some of the input which we got talks exactly about that point, because that leads into disruptive, cutting edge, bleeding edge, which I've not heard before. So obviously we're doing a lot to, not only be resilient to change, but actually shaking things up in the sector. Isn't that right?
Well, it depends from what point of view.
Well, somebody put disruptive. And innovation are definitely overused terms for things that are really actually just constructive and evolutionary, that they are incremental and viable and not really disruptive.
Well, I don't agree. Because we have had some disruption in the water sector. I mean, from the technology point of view, I mean, if we take blockchain, for instance, blockchain in water is disrupting the sector. It might not be accepted, but it is disrupting the sector. And I think, very positively. And I think that's why we need to shake up the sector. And it might not be that we will all, or everything will come from the water sector from an innovation point of view. But I think another thing is looking outside the water sector and not being resilient. And we know that the climate is changing. We know that. So what do we do about it? I know there's a lot of things, I'm saying here, but what I want to say is innovation is not a buzzword. There is true, real innovation in the water sector. It's not taken up.
Right.
That's the issue.
Emma, would you like to pitch in? Because I would definitely want to ask Philip about blockchain in other industries and how disruptive that is, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I only have only have a positive relationship with the word resilience. I think it's the goal we should all be striving for. I don't think it's a means to an end. I think it's the end point is that we should all have resilience amongst ourselves individually, as organizations, as a sector, as a world, as nations. We should be able to bounce back from catastrophe, bounce back from disruption, bounce back from climate change, or at least be able to absorb the shocks of these major global changes that are happening. Climate change, I think, is an important phrase to keep in everyone's vocabulary and keep front of mind, and connecting the two and finding ways, either technological ways or traditional ways, like things like permaculture, to be able to absorb those shocks and be more resilient, I think are very important, in the same way that people being resilient to shocks is important. And we're seeing that a lot in workplaces now, that, people are getting very tired and frustrated at how things are going. I think we need to find the processes that get to that end goal of resilience.
Yeah, and your comment has been echoed in the chat from Lisa as well. She's heard of human and social resilience from Tony Wong and thought it was really great that social and physical resilience go hand in hand. A very inspiring word. And Tom is also saying that resilience should be kept. This is why we didn't even put it up for discussion. We knew this was going to happen. Yes, Jade saying resilience has a very positive connotation for me, but I do appreciate hearing these other perspectives as well. What about in other languages is the question here. Philip, I'm going to put that to you. Auf Deutsch.
I mean, there we talk about resilience, so it's actually the same word. but I'm not really sure if resilience.
You copy
really
everything from English, don't you?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I'm not really sure if it's really a German word or if we just adopted it from the English word.
I think up there doesn't work quite as well.
Yeah, yeah, but I think it's resilience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And what about blockchain and disruption?
Oh, that's always a really, really tricky question. You know, I'm not working in the blockchain industry, so I don't have to sell anything because I'm working at the university. I'm more speaking about blockchain in terms of an evolution more than it is a revolution. So blockchain really can take part in many industries, but it will, of course, take a lot of time still. And of course, we are just in the beginning. So we have maybe 1% of the potential 100% which blockchain can like reach. And also, to be honest, I never actually have looked at blockchain adoption in the water sector right now. So what I mostly do is, of course, as I'm working for a finance school, it's looking at the financial markets in mobility and energy, but not so much in the water industry. So if you would like to, we can do another webinar where maybe we can talk about use cases, blockchain and water. But right now, I'm not aware of any specific use cases in the water industry right now.
Understood.
I can share some with you, Philipp.
Oh yeah.
We did a webinar on use cases also I can share with you.
Oh yeah, thank you very much.
Magnificent, thank you. Okay, we're now going to go and carry on with our next word, and I'll make sure that I share the screen, or at least I will try and share the screen with, I've got so many screens up. I should have done what you did, Emma, and close some of these screens here, but can we now see smart water? We can.
Interesting.
Okay. A very interesting one. Gaetane, do you have something to tell us about smart water?
Yeah.
I'm sure Emma has.
Not being controversial again. Well, what disturbs me with the word smart, it means, you know, that beforehand we were not smart in the English term, you know, like in English understanding. So we were not very intelligent before, and thank God, you know, the digitalization of the sector came in, and now we can be all very intelligent, and we can actually, you know, manage our water in a smarter way. So I'm not sure that smart is actually the right word. I would rather say, you know, like it's more about optimizing resources. It's more sort of an active verb that we should have, or an active adjective, you know, related to water, because the digital technologies are going to help us optimize our water better. It's going to help us, you know, manage the water better, but it's not that it's going to make us smarter.
Smarter, you've got the verb maybe already. I'm going to open the poll, at least I'm going to try if I can, to judge people's dislike for smart water. So the higher the rating, the more you want to get rid of this or change it, whilst Emma gives us her perspective as a rising smart water leader. Have I got that right?
No, Phoenix was for the other one. My story about smart water really connects with how people not in the water sector view this. And it goes back to last summer before I was moving to the Netherlands. I was catching up with old friends and people I hadn't seen in a while, and crossed paths with somebody who I knew from childhood who was asking me what I was doing these days. And I said, oh, you know, I'm working in the smart water sector. And they said, oh, that's so cool. Do you get to hang out with Jennifer Aniston? And it took me a minute to understand what they were saying. But essentially, it all came down to smart water to them connects with the brand, which is well branded. It's well known.
Coca-Cola belongs to Coca-Cola, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you don't work in the smart water sector or the water sector, you don't really necessarily know what that means. So I don't think it has a deep connotation for people who aren't necessarily involved in it. And if we want to be communicating this opportunity to transform and optimize our use of resources, then I think it is important to have a different jargony word for it.
Good. Well, it's also scoring high on the dislike scale, if you like, at 8.0. So very similar as well to our first two terms. Phil, are you back yet? I'm hoping he is. I'm hoping he's listening in and not gone for a cup of tea, but we'll see. Philip, give us your relationship to...
Sorry, I'm just slipping between all my screens.
Yes, all good. We'll come to you in a sec, Phil, for some guiding thoughts. But first, Philip's sort of reaction to the word smart water.
Frankly speaking, I have no idea what that means. So, I mean, actually, I was thinking about the water brand, so Smart Water, pretty popular in the US, I think. But I mean, I could imagine this means something, or with some smart systems, maybe AI or something combined with water. But frankly speaking, I have no idea what this means.
That's a clear statement.
And Wally the water drop goes to university.
Phil, what have you got for us? What's your take on
am I talking now about smart water? Or?
Yeah, smart water. So firstly, you know, what did you feel about it? And then I've opened up the word cloud so people can give us some input. But what sort of direction would you like to try and lead us in?
I kind of feel, you know, the smart thing has been done to death. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's quite old and outdated. You know, as jargon goes, it's gone past its shelf life. So I think, you know, we need to look at in terms of upgrading, you know, in what way the water's smart, perhaps. So that would be my sort of thinking in that, you know what I mean? I think with jargon, what you need to headline a new story in a way, and a story that people can get excited about. And smart water just doesn't do that for me. And I think, as the other Phil said, not coming from, you know, the water industry, I'm not quite sure what smart water is.
H2IQ, symbiotic, interconnected water network, connected water, circular. Some pretty similar trains of thought there.
What about water 4.0 or 3.0, 5.0? I mean, how would it resonate to you, Emma?
I also feel like the 4.0 is almost overdone, and to me has some almost negative connotations with the kind of over-industrialized revolutions that we talk about in so many places. I have used it before. I'm just not sure it has that full connection that maybe we want out of it. But this also goes down to my feeling around most phrases and terms that we use is it depends what we want the outcome to be. So if we're talking about engaging regular people who don't know about all of the inner workings of the water sector and all of the work that goes on behind the scenes for them to be able to turn on their tap and access clean water, that's one thing. If it's about connecting with people in the sector to get them excited about transforming their utilities, that's another. If we want to get young people on board to join the water sector and bring in these innovations, that's another. And so I think the words have to also be appropriate to the audiences.
Well, we had a comment from Jade saying that the definition of smart, number one, having or showing a quick-witted intelligence, or number two, of a device program so as to be able to be capable of some independent action. I mean, wordsmith Phil, smart as well can have the connotation of being a bit sly and a bit crafty and a bit not necessarily intelligent, right?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, wise water certainly has a more sage feel to it, doesn't it? In that sort of sense. No, but some interesting suggestions there. And I think the water 4.0 is quite an interesting. I thought your take on that was quite interesting, Emma. You know, the over-industrialization, perhaps connotations that come with something like that.
Jonathan was saying, do we mean digital? Do we mean AI? Do we mean VR? Do we need an overarching phrase as well? And, you know, Jonathan, feel free through slido.com at J791 to enter in your alternative ideas here as well. Okay, WaterWise is used by many organizations, but not for smart water, just for good water management overall.
Yeah, that's right, in fact. That's absolutely true, actually. I like, you know, the WaterWise.
But isn't good water management overall enhancing or utilizing digital technologies and connecting everything together? Isn't that kind of like the new way of doing good resource management?
It is, but it's you know, going back to the conversation we're just having, you know, about evolution or revolution. In this case, it's probably an evolution of the sector. Whether it's going to revolutionize the sector, I think that remains to be seen. But going to the digital era, does it need to be sort of put as something, you know, next to water? I mean, it's, at the end of the day, it's just, you know, about water management, whatever tools you're going to be using to do it.
Marta is agreeing with you and says it's a path, it takes time.
Yes.
Good. Phil, have you got some ammunition there?
What are we on now, Andy? Which one am I?
At the moment, we're on smart water, so take that with you. And again, I'll do a screenshot or whatever. We're going to go on to the fourth term. We have kind of semi-run out of the official time, but anybody who needs to drop off, no problem, because we're recording, and we'll send you a link to where the recording is. But let's spend another 5 minutes on our final term, and then we'll come back, Phil, with some of your results, okay?
Okay.
But let's go on to the fourth one, which is water is the new oil. What does that mean, Gaetane?
Well, I'm returning the question to you, Andrew.
To me?
Yes.
Well, I know that Phil's got a real opinion about this. Let's have Philip then firstly say, because this is completely new to him, what that makes him feel like.
Of course, it brings the idea that water will be very scarce in the future, so it will have some kind of greater value compared to now. Oil is also, so you only have a certain amount of oil. So you have a certain amount of water you can use in the world. Of course, if you think about water and oil, what I think about is, for example, if oil is coming to the water, for example, on the sea when a ship is sinking, then I'm thinking about water and oil in this connection maybe. But I think water is the new oil is also a pretty negative term, because people should have the feeling that water is some kind of a human right and oil isn't. So you only need oil when you, for example, drive a car or need some fuel or have some kind of industry running. So I wouldn't like that water is compared to oil at all.
Well,
Emma, anything to add?
I think that was beautifully said. Anything I add to that will not be as eloquent.
Good. And Phil, I think you had some very similar thoughts in that direction, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely, it's got no place in, you know, the sustainable economic climate of today, you know, and I think the association of, you know, oil with water, which is, you know, a human right, sort of, you know, tarnishes the water industry in that respect. So
let's see if the audience agree. So we've opened up the poll to see if they dislike water is the new oil. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Phil, carry on.
No, I think I was done there.
You were done? So
yeah, but that's pretty comprehensive, that one, isn't it?
So far, not everybody's finished, but it seems to be people take even more objection to water is the new oil, apart from someone's not too.
Just to say, Andrew, I mean, there's an interesting comment, you know, from the audience saying, you know, like, if we had had this conversation 15 years ago, would we have said that water is the new oil? You know, we didn't like it. So it goes to also, I think it's an evolving exercise in terms of the kind of language we use, you know, to reflect the society in which we live today. And water is a new oil. It doesn't have, the connotation that it could have had 15 years ago. So that's interesting to think about this as well. So thank you for this comment.
Yep, and going back to what Phil says, the jargon we use has a certain context and also a certain period of time and a period of perhaps development in which it fits. Yeah. And we also had a very good comment from the Civic Ledger saying, we've been changing things over the years and we're talking about where it is now today, but why? Why do we feel there's a need for new language, new actors entering, new products, existing actors, desire to drive, but also society is changing, like we just said, and the way we view oil indeed today is completely different, I think, than it was 15 years ago. Very great point. Good. Anything to add there, Phil? Emma?
I was just going to say, just adding on to that, the water sector has a bit of an image problem as well, that as communicators, and we all should be communicators and advocates for the water sector, we need to drive that change externally to attract people in, to attract innovation and new skill sets and new people. So adapting the language and adopting new ways of talking about the great work that we do is also important. And that's partly why I thought this conversation was so interesting.
Excellent. So again, your input, please. What kind of words and phrases and ideas do you have to get rid of this? Because 8.5 on the scala shows that everybody wants to get rid of water is the new oil and stop people using this term. So Phil, do you have anything to sort of direct us in terms of ideas?
Yeah, I think maybe with this one, I think it's sort of how to, if we literally take that phrase, how do we insert something else which fits the current economic climate better? And the fact that we live in a post-global warming world where sustainability is much more key, and the value of water as an opportunity needs to come across as a viable economic investment as well as a sustainable investment. That would be my sort of input with that.
Very good. Okay, any more comments, everybody? Words, phrases, do we have anything in the chat? We need to be cognizant of the need to conserve and reuse water. We don't want to be tarred with the same brush as the oil sector, which is very discredited. Certainly, here. And oil is a commodity that we use and discard, burn it, or we turn it into plastic. Another word, plastic, that we see very differently today than we did even probably 3 years ago, never mind 15. Okay. Philip, data is the new oil as well.
That's true, but the difference, I would say,
sorry?
I mean, the difference is, though, that I really have the feeling, again, coming to human rights, so that everybody should have access to water, and data and oil is not necessary to live, I would say. So if we talk about like industrialized countries, maybe water is the new oil. But if we talk about this in the context of developing countries, or like, for example, in Africa, South America, or some parts of Asia, I think this could be really, really dangerous for these countries, and in a sense that these people aren't able then to afford water anymore. And on the other hand, data and oil is, I don't know, it's nice to have for industry, for industrialized countries, but it's not as important to other parts of the world.
Got it. Okay, Phil, have you taken note of those terms here? We have rehydrate, water is a treasure, water is valuable, water is pressure.
I have taken them, and I'm just going to send you a PDF now.
All right, smart. So we have some results already. That's fabulous. Thank you so much for that. I'd just like to get back to a couple of other terms which we had, if we can, Gaetane especially. We were talking about a term where someone said, oh, well, we're very different in the water sector. What happens to you when someone says that to you?
Well, I'm always asking, why are we different? And I can't see where the difference is, between us and the rest of the world. I'm always keen on being open and learn from other sectors and bring the good things to the water sector. I'm very much in favor of exchanging, discussing, learning, but certainly not because I'm different.
Yeah.
Because, the learning curve should be within the water sector, and going to the next step should also be our motto in the water sector. So being innovative and, all the buzzwords that we know. But I think, no, I'm not different.
And conservative, Emma. We're a very conservative sector.
It's a very conservative sector. It's a very risk-averse sector. I had a conversation a few months ago for the Dutch water sector who self-proclaim themselves to be very conservative. And for the most part, it is true. It's a conservative sector. We work on what could essentially be life or death product that we deliver to people's taps. And so it makes sense that people want to be careful about it, but conservative in the sense of conservation and going back to the root of where that comes from, I think is something that we could all merit in bringing back and bringing that thinking back, as opposed to the more political side of being conservative. I don't think it's a bad word at all. I think we need to just take ownership of what the root of it means and get back to the nature of our sector is about conservation and saving water.
Excellent points. Philip, does that resonate a bit with your water as a human right side of things, I guess?
I mean, I think conservative is not a bad word necessarily, because conservative for me means that you bring maybe good things from the past to the future and get rid of bad things from the past. So being conservative doesn't necessarily need to mean that something is bad or something. It also can have some kind of positive impact on the past and to the future.
Great points. Okay, anything more to add, because the results are in? Let's go straight to them. I'm going to, Philip, you sent me over this this document, which you've edited on the spot, almost. No, it was slightly pre-prepared, but you've added some new thoughts in there as well. So this is a bit of a result of our discussion, and I'd like you to report, please.
Sure. So I think I already sort of gave away some of the names for this first one. But yeah, I think with this one, I think the focus on how we can put a positive spin on essentially recycled water. So toilet to tap. Oh God, no, please. So Singapore did it so much better with new water. Renewed water. New is it's still one of the most powerful ideas in advertising and communication. I think the idea of refreshed water, that you revitalize that water, certainly has a much more appealing sort of sound to it. I think this idea of, winning back water, that you can reclaim water, which would otherwise have been lost, is quite a strong sort of approach in this direction. And another sort of articulation of that could be one water. What I really liked from some of the word clouds was the upcycled water. I think this also, I think is, upgrading in line with, a new sort of upcycling trend, that, could also apply well in this sort of sense, so that's in a similar vein to upstreaming water. Angel tears, I really love this in terms of the pictures in the mind and the imagery. I'm just not sure how it maybe sort of works in in terms of the story. I think there's quite a bigger story to be told there, once opened up. So the backstory is a bit bigger, but I think it's beautiful and poetic. And one that I also mentioned earlier, the Phoenix water. I think there's something quite interesting in that, in a very different sort of way.
Good. Any comments, Emma, Gaetane?
I'm sure the city of Phoenix would agree with you on that being a solid name for it.
I like upcycled as well, because that would resonate to a number of people, and up is very positive. We're going up.
Yeah.
So I like the word upcycled. Obviously, new water is already taken, so I'm not sure, in terms of copyright. But
I know our friends in Singapore who do not do it for commercial reasons would love to share that with the world.
Well, maybe, that's something we can think about.
Yeah.
We all talk about new water. That would be the new European jargon. And I know
maybe it could be new water, newer than new.
Water, yeah. Well,
so good we named it twice.
And I would be actually interested in understanding how this can be translated in different languages.
Yeah, well, that wasn't part of today's remit,
I also like the upcycled.
Yes, no, I'm a big favourite of upcycle myself.
Pre-loved.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice
used.
one.
Yeah. So fabulous result. Okay, let's move on to phrase number 2, future leaders.
Yeah, so with this one, I think the two sort of ideas that I thought carried the most traction would be to get away from this idea that future leaders doesn't really give credit to the current achievements of those it labels. I think two more solid sort of approaches would be talents and visionaries, and perhaps some articulations of those could be new water talents, liquid talents, aqua visionaries, for example. What I really liked from the word cloud was the wave makers. I think the wave makers was very nice. It's certainly got some attitude about it as well.
It doesn't segregate either at all, is it, between young, old, or whatever?
Sure.
It can be anyone.
I thought like another sort of one that does segregate a little bit more would be the new wave. But I think a new wave in water is also something that I can imagine people would want to be a part of, want to belong to, and find a sense of sort of belonging within there. And I think for me, a label should be something, a badge that people want to be proud of and wear and really feel a part of. So
Gaetane's just added it to her email signature.
Can we say the wave shakers as well? Or does it not? Because that's what we need, we need to shake the water sector. So I think we need shakers.
Yeah, I mean, you could have the wave makers and shakers, makers and shakers, but then there's maybe too much shaking and, too much going on. But it could be, we could do a viral dance video about it, But yeah, some of the other ideas from the word cloud, the new water champions, guardians of the future. I thought there was some merit in those as directions too. So some interesting input there. But moving down, I think the second issue for me with this was really the future leaders is a label given by the establishment at the moment, and I think for me, what would future talent really want to label themselves after given the choice? If they could, wouldn't they rather unite around a common progressive mission that they all share? So some ideas for this could be, I don't know, the aquanauts, the hydronauts, coming back to your idea of entrepreneurialism as well, the waterpreneurs, the hydropreneurs, people who share an ongoing mission to continuously push water forward, something that, like a new wave as well, or like the wave makers, which, has a certain sort of attitude and a club sort of feeling to it.
Emma, you are a party to some of these new thoughts and developments and trying to find some new jargon within the Swan group, I believe. Tell us what you think.
I really like wave makers. The new wave could be interesting, ushering in a new generation of thinking and action. I also wrote down hydronauts because I definitely will use that at some point. Maybe my new email signature as well. I like these. I think the original use of the word future was in there for a reason and might end up staying in there if we are self-assigning ourselves these hashtags or these brands or these titles. And so maybe it will come down to leaders of or leaders for the future. Yeah.
I really like the for the future. That's new to me, actually. I didn't think about it in that way before. So I commend you for that, sharing that. Thank you. Good. Philip, we're going to come to you later, but let's carry on with Phil's report. Smart water.
Okay, so for this one, I focused really on what I thought smart was. That the water was smart. So for me it was a question of just really upgrading the story, from smart, which to me the trend has sort of passed a little bit. So some ideas would have been, cerebral water, living, organic, thinking water, enlightened water, for a new age of water systemic management, for example. Empowered water, I think, that the potential of the water is contained within itself. I thought that was quite an interesting direction. An ingenious water, let's face it, it's way smarter than the old stuff. I think as well from the audience, connected water was raised as well. So moving in that direction as well. The water net, the internet of water, and what we spoke about as well with the sort of aligning with the industry 4.0 trend. So water 4.0 or even H2 4.0.
The sentiment being though that is also a little bit washed out.
Yeah, I think you could when I don't know, when you upgrade jargon in line with existing jargon, again you're sort of setting a mark in the sand that will ebb away at some point in the not too distant future. So if you hang your hat on something that's very modern, within a few years it's going to probably sound as dated as toilet to tap. So that's always the danger, but I guess that's the nature of jargon. You want to sort of compress an idea into something which is the zeitgeist, which sort of hits on something which people can relate to very quickly and tell a much bigger story with, and that you have no control over how that story may change in the rest of the world during that time. Which leads then to another session like this where you come back and look at it maybe in 5-10 years time and draw the same conclusions that its shelf life has gone.
Okay, the next thoughts: hive water, smart swarm water.
So these were sort of ideas based around the sort of the holistic hive mind intelligence of water, for example, or the swarm intelligence. Which I think is an interesting direction. I think the backstory is quite big on those two. But I thought there were a few interesting different directions to go in here. I'm not sure I've cracked it so far, but I think maybe it points the way in a few areas. And I've just noted down two sort of inputs from the word cloud from the audience. The wise water, I think that has a very sort of I don't know. I think I like this association of wise with water. In a sense, there's something very comforting about that. As opposed to the flyby trend of smart.
We have a colleague called Natasha Wiseman who has Wise on Water for her PR agency. So that's definitely something that she would vote for if she was with us. Good.
And then I think there was a very similar one to the Water 4.0, the H2IQ, you know, another sort of alternative with intelligence there. So
yeah,
no, I'd be curious to know your thoughts on these.
Hydrogen and not hydrogen dioxide. Okay, Emma, Gaetane, quick comment. Any favorites?
Well,
Go ahead, Gaetane.
Oh, thank you.
That's my fault. Sorry.
Personally, I would not call it anything, because, you know, when we speak in 10 years' time, probably smart or Water 4.0 or H2 IQ, you know, might be outdated. So I'm not sure I would call it something, or I would qualify it, you know, with smart or something else.
Emma?
It's a really good point. I totally agree. I think it's getting to be so embedded across the water sector or water industry, sorry, Andrew, that we start this digital journey across the board such that in 10 years, it's just going to be business as usual. And so why go through the effort of rebranding it when in a few years, it's just going to be the water sector. That's just how things will be.
Okay. Cool.
But if not that, then the enlightened, I think, has a whole different connotation to it that I think we can do some fun spin-off ads about.
Yep. Ingenious and ingenious is also both related to water quite closely. Anyway, moving on. Mr. Phil.
Yeah, so I think we all sort of agreed with this, that you know, very negative sort of connotations. So I was thinking, what more bankable comparisons could we make? And I really was focused more on the opportunities here. So the first one, water is the new blue gold, which I've called the Andy Walker approach, mate. Which yeah, you know, I think there's a certain validity in there. And water is liquid gold, which I think is quite interesting. I think what I was struggling with there, you know, was, you know, how to find something modern to equate that to. So, you know, when I looked at Phil up there in the corner, I thought water is liquid Bitcoin. And then moving even further in a new direction, you know, water is a unicorn. You know, it's $1 billion opportunity. I think this goes, you know, very much in a new direction. But yeah, could we have unicorn water? You know, is water, you know, the original and new unicorn? But what I really sort of thought was that, you know, in essence, when you look at water as an investment, I think, you know, the profiteering from water is always going to be an issue, isn't it? But, you know, I think a more sort of muted sort of way of saying that is, you know, you can always bank on water. You know what I mean? It's you know, it will never go out of fashion. It will never go out of demand.
Gaetane's added that to her email signature as well, right, Gaetane?
That's a very good one, actually. Yes, and my investor, you know, tendiness, yeah, I would say I love this one. You can always bank on water, and I wish, you know, water would be a unicorn. You know,
maybe it could be. Maybe you can turn it into a unicorn. You know.
Well, my mission in life, Phil.
Phil?
What?
Next. Rehydrate
okay,
water.
so from the word clouds, I think, you know, the word cloud sort of made me feel like I'd been working a bit in the wrong direction, you know, looking at water too much as an opportunity. And this idea of water is life and water is valuable, you know, that water is, you know, when you think about it, you know, what are you investing in? Do you know what I mean? You are investing in the ultimate elixir of life in a way, aren't you? And from that, I kind of think, you know, to equate sort of profits with water, you know, in a way is really not necessarily the direction that you want to go. So I just tried to do something with water as the ultimate investment, which I think, you know, has quite a lot of clout about it. And essentially, if you drill it all down, you know, water is the future, you know, from an investment point of view, from a sustainable point of view, from a yeah, from a human point of view.
It's very interesting, Gaetane, that Phil picked up on the nuance there between, you know, us insiders and not really thinking of profit and economics and whatever, and you know, has had his mind slightly shifted, maybe in the wrong direction? Question mark.
Yeah, no, I think I'm sort of, you know, it's interesting to see what sort of ideas were coming from, you know, the audience, you know, which was this much more sort of, you know, water is much more precious. It's not, you know, and maybe that is the, you know, it's like my kind of feeling when I see the phrase water is the new oil. It's about how do we make, you know, water more investable? You know, how do we highlight the opportunity of water more, you know, which led me in the unicorn direction.
All right, Emma and Gaetane, how do we balance sort of the conservation and human right with the economics and the profit?
Emma, do you want to give it a go first?
I think Emma's raised her hand.
Oh, shit. So I love the water is the ultimate investment. I think this is a great way to combine the economic aspect that we need and the emotive aspect that we need, along with the technology development that is needed to sustain what we're aiming for as goal, which is universal access to water and sanitation for all. And so I think framing it in this way as the ultimate investment, which could be in terms of money or time or resources or energy, is just such a beautiful way to wrap it up. And my issue usually with all of these different phrases like water is the new oil is that it really frames it from a human-centric perspective. And we as a sector need to take a step back and realize that we're not the only water users in the world. And so we need to conserve it not just for ourselves, but for the rest of the planet that also needs clean water. So water is the ultimate investment, I think, is my new favorite phrase of the day and has supplanted the angel's tears.
Yes, okay. Well, Michael has kind of agreed with you quite a lot on that. He said that maybe we should stop thinking about water as an investment opportunity, so opportunism. There are things we should do just because it's the right thing to do. And if we do something just to make money, maybe it's not the right motivation, is what he's saying there. Gaetane, you now have the chance to respond, and it's a tough one.
Well, first of all, you know, like it's an easy one because I wish, you know, water would be considered as an investment opportunity. So it's not quite yet.
We're resilient against that, Gaetane.
So I wish, you know, it would be. But I like also the phrase, you know, water is the ultimate investment, because at the end of the day, if you don't have water, then you die. So it's not just from a money point of view, you know, if I leave my investor hat aside, it's the investment in the future, in humanity. I mean, yeah, we're just going to die if we don't have any water. You can't survive without water. So I would rather prefer water is the ultimate investment to water is life, because we know that water is life. But I think we need to give it a bit more challenge. And I think the ultimate investment would give that challenge to the sector in the or in all the senses that we've just mentioned with Emma. Okay,
fabulous. Let's leave it at that because time is pressing. Philip, I'd like now to come to you. We've heard, just as a summary, we've heard, you know, kind of favorites instead of toilet to tap are things like Phoenix and upcycling. In terms of the future leaders, the wave makers, the hydronauts for the future, the leaders for the future. Number 3, nothing. So, you know, it's going to be quite normal pretty soon. We don't need to give it any kind of a label. This is just wise use of our intelligence and our tools to be able to manage water well. And fourthly, the ultimate investment. Have we made ourselves more, Emma, appealing to you?
I would say so, because for me, I'm really happy with all of the terms. I mean, I like 1, 2, and 4. I like a lot. With the term smart water, frankly speaking, I still don't know what that is, to be really honest. And also naming it water 4.0, I still don't have any idea. So actually my take is always trying to name things as they are. So not trying to find some kind of buzzwords, but just naming things as they actually are. And I think with 1, 2, and 4, this is a really good approach. So I really like these words, and it helps me to understand better what you are doing in the end. And I think this is necessary for a lot of other terms as well, even in the blockchain sector, because I think so-called experts are always trying to make up crazy buzzy words to actually exclude outsiders from the world. So to actually make it a bit more monopolistic in the end or something. I don't know.
No idea what you mean.
So I think what we did today is really important to actually attract persons to a certain kind of industry, and this doesn't only hold to the water industry, but also in my industry, the blockchain industry, for example, that we are really try to like open terms up and really describe them what they are, that outsiders as well know what we are talking about in the end.
Okay. So Emma and Gaetane, last words from you, and I'll just plug, I think as well, that Philipp Schulden, blockchain expert, is also easily available through LinkedIn. You can find him as well as a connector of mine on LinkedIn if you're looking for him to you know, give us a bit of input here, or maybe someone's got a job for him. Very difficult, I think, for him to take away from what he's doing right now, which is really exciting, being really honestly one of the leaders in blockchain in Germany, and therefore in Europe and maybe parts of the world as well. So, you know, Philipp, massive thanks to you for joining us. But Gaetane and Emma, just give us your final sort of words before we also thank Phil.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for organizing this. I think it's been absolutely great. And I'm glad, you know, I'm part now of the new wave shakers and movers. Now let's start, you know, using the jargon. And if you don't mind, Phil, you know, I think water is the ultimate investment. I'm going to use this, you know, in my signature for the future because I love it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's great. Yeah. So thanks everyone for a great discussion. I think we've gone a bit over and maybe have lost a few people from the beginning, but I've really enjoyed participating in this. It's been really interesting just to bounce ideas around, and I think the way that we talk about things matters so much to how we engage with the public. And in a sector that is so necessary and so crucial to human life, we really need to do a better job at speaking to the everyday person, whether it's about water reuse and getting rid of the yuck factor in the toilet to tap or the Phoenix water, or engaging leaders of the future, leaders for the future. I think words matter, and this kind of initiative is great. So thank you very much for putting this together.
Fabulous. And there was a question as, you know, will the results be published? They will be published. I'll send everybody an email with that took part with the results which we have. And on that as well in the footer is Phil's contact details, at least if you want me to send them to the people who've taken part, Phil. If not, let me know. Because, you know, he's a great resource, I think. And he's done all of this for free for us, for the love of water. And I'll buy you certainly a refined water in a wee dram one of these days when we can actually come together again. So Phil, a massive thank you to you. Absolutely, thank you.
No, thanks. It's been really interesting. You know, I feel like you know, I've been on the fringes of water. I feel like I've wet my head in it now. I feel like I've had a few buckets thrown over me. So
I am glad you said head as well. I think yeah, Emma was thinking like me, you were going to come up with something else. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that we have gone over time, and you can sack the moderator, and that's cool because he's actually taking a break anyway from this kind of moderation. No, we did take a bit longer there, and I really appreciate your patience. Loads of people have stayed until this late hour. We have run sessions like this with the purpose of trying to share amongst our community within water, particularly around sort of marketing and communications areas. And many of you have taken part in a lot of these sessions. This is what we've done since May. So that's been our season 1, which we have concluded now. We're going to restart again in the spring or the late winter. And we have some cracking ideas and some first very, very special guests like we've had today. It's going to be at least of the same quality. So in the meantime, you know, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you very much for everybody putting all this effort in. And we will be emailing you with the results, but also some updates on what's happening within KnowH2Ow before our season 2 starts in 2021. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll catch up very soon, I hope.
Thank
Thank you very much,
everyone.
guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.